People who have found a dead body, what's the story? Story number 1. 2017. Came home after taking my AP exams and knew I killed them, so I went to our local grocery chain to pick up some food to celebrate with my mom and dad, who had been going through some tough times. But felt like the summer would be better for us as a family. Come home, the house is so silent, our dog wasn't making any noise at all. Call for my dad, as he had been on mental leave from work for a couple months at this point, no response. Check the garage and see his Jeep was still in there. Go upstairs, see that his wallet, keys, phone, and a note to my mom and the 3 kids was on the bed. Go to the basement, and has just hung to the right of the stairs. All blue and cold, tried to cut him down but couldn't muster the strength. I could tell it wouldn't have mattered, he was long gone, still think about it every day. They said he probably died around to 30. Which was when I would have been home if I didn't have AP exams that day, but it wouldn't have mattered. Miss him every day. He didn't get to see me be a first-generation college graduate, meet this girl who has been my rock for almost 5 years, and has missed for grandkids between my 2 sisters. But man, do I wish I could watch one more Bulls or Cubs game with him, to go from calling me out of school when I was 6 to go watch the Cubs to that sometimes makes me feel that life isn't worth living if it's how it ends. Story number 2. Worked in an apartment complex of around 100 units. We had warned all the tenants we would be lubricating the locks and taking the time to fix or change some, as well as other maintenance stuff for the door and hinges. I was on my last floor. I was dreading one door, as the old man living there liked to chat, and he would have been following me in the corridor for the rest of the floor. Knocked a few times. Didn't get an answer. I unlocked the door and announced myself. As I tried to get in, I met some resistance. He was an odd guy who used to do the same job back in the 50s and 60s and told me he didn't trust anyone because of things he saw, so I assumed he was sleeping, and he put a chair behind the door. I closed it and went for the other apartments. Time came for his apartment, last one. Knocked again and still no answer. I knew he left once a day around noon for his daily shopping. I unlocked the door, announcing myself again, while struggling to open the door. The chair was holding the door pretty well, and I didn't want to damage it, so I pried enough for me to squeeze through. Past the door, it closes behind me, and there was no chair. The guy was dead behind the door. I didn't even check to see if he was hurt. I knew instantly he was gone. Felt like my legs had been swept under me. But I was still standing. I calmly, and I say that, as what I think I looked like, I probably wasn't, called the police to explain I had just found someone dead. The operator asked me to do CPR. Went through the steps with me. But I couldn't. I knew he was dead and probably had been for almost a day. The operator told me the police were on their way. I moved the guy just enough so I could open the door normally. Some tenant steps out, super joyous. What a lovely day, me faking a smile. Went down to wait for the police and showed them where he was. Turns out he died of old age or age-related incident, and there was nothing I could have done. Even if I was there when it happened, told me he probably took a shit, got up and died on the spot since he was near the bathroom. I was working alone that day. Boss had left on vacation, and I was the only worker for the week. The owner of the building arrived by chance about 30 minutes into my questioning by the police. Didn't even think to call him. He took care of the rest. I left, walked a bit, and got myself a juicy burger. I was traumatized for a few weeks until we decided to renovate the place. After the legal stuff was over, and I faced my fears by going back inside that apartment. Story number 3. I was a caregiver for a few months, and during that time, I primarily took care of a man in his 60s who had dementia after suffering a stroke. This guy could barely speak, and had no idea what year it was, and as a result, couldn't really communicate what he was feeling. He had a sister who lived him, but basically did nothing for him besides take his disability money. I started noticing something strange a few days before it happened. He was weirdly quiet and wasn't having BMIS. One night I put him to bed at the end of my shift at 8 p.m. and drove home. I remember it was pissing rain, and I was listening to Riders on the Storm, and I felt like something bad was going to happen. The next morning I came into my shift at 9 a.m. and my client's sister was on her way out to run errands or something, and I came inside and started to get my client's meds ready and clocked in. I then walked over to my client's room and opened the door. The first thing I noticed was a sweet fragrance, and I saw my client in the dark with his hand up in the air, like he was grabbing something. I figured he had finally had a BM at night and I would have to clean it up, so I walked over to him and noticed he was completely still and had vomit all over his chest, and his mouth was agape with his eyes open. I reached over to his hand and to my horror, it was unbelievably cold. Any of you who have felt a dead body know what I mean, it just feels so wrong to the touch. So I called 911. I told them what happened. Meanwhile, I'm sobbing and just fully having a mental breakdown. The cops come and interview me. They asked the sister the last time she had checked on him. She told them that she saw him last night. When I was putting him to bed at 8 p.m., she had not checked on him at all that night. For 13 hours he was in bed without anyone checking in on him, the autopsy said. He had a massive heart attack that night, and based on how cold he was, I'm guessing he had died shortly after I left. Shit haunts me to this day. Story number 4. My mom wasn't answering her phone on Mother's Day. It wasn't abnormal, as she had been like that ever since my dad passed away in May of 2018. This year was the 5-year anniversary of his passing, and on the day would have been 55 years of marriage had he not passed. Her neighbor messaged me saying he couldn't get a hold of her. That's when I knew something was wrong. Her neighbor was close with her and was always there helping her. I think he secretly had a thing for her. As they were both the same age, she always answered him, even if she didn't want to be bothered. I drove over there earlier than I was supposed to. She was deaf, so she couldn't talk on the phone, but she would always text. I walked in the house and didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. I walked into the back bedroom of her second-floor master bedroom, and as I started going through the door, I saw her knees on the bed. So I thought she was just sitting there. As I walked a little closer, I saw a gun in her lap. I knew what had happened. I called the police and got out of the house and threw up on the front lawn. I'm a disabled Army vet. I've seen some up things. I have never seen anything like that. It's the worst thing I've ever seen, and I can't unsee it. Every day I wake up and see her laying there. Blood and brain matter all over everything. She had tricked her neighbor into loading the gun for her, so he felt horrible too. It was just all round awful.